Well, welcome to our discussion for week one. You've got a couple of discussion prompts that you're going to be answering. One is to identify weaknesses in your own leadership style. These will be evident from experiences you've had. For example, if you're a new leader, maybe you've run into some issues where people didn't want to follow, or people had questions or whatever. We all have our weaknesses in leadership. None of us is perfect, and leadership is a dynamic process that we continue to learn and grow. And I say it's a dynamic process because each person is different. Each leadership situation is going to be different. You can learn some principles of leadership that we'll be learning within this course, but we really do learn leadership by doing it. So please be honest in this format, and I will say up front that nobody's allowed to pick on anybody else. We all have our issues, and we all have our struggles, and so let's help each other out and help each other grow, and let's do that in a kind, compassionate, and caring format where we can have the scaffolding to build each other up. So be honest as you approach this. Be thoughtful. What areas do you struggle in? And in light of those, what do you intend to do to fix those? And we'll explore that together. And please do read chapters 1 through 3 in your textbook, because they will frame your answers. And please do cite your sources as you do answer this. And even though this is a reflection type question, we still need to make sure that we're engaging our academic sources and citing them appropriately. I look forward to the discussion that will ensue, and let me just in closing give you an example of my leadership training, and a not so stellar example of my leadership. I was a brand new would-be staff sergeant. I had just found out that I was being promoted from senior airman to staff sergeant. This is back in, I'll tell you, 1995, so it's quite a ways back. And I had virtually no training in leadership other than what I had in Airman Leadership School, which is a lot of theory, some practical, but you really can't do practical leadership unless you're in a leadership role. And I discovered that the hard way. So our shop chief at the time was a master sergeant. He was working in our flight office running the fabrication flight, and he came over and pulled me and one other man into the office, and we had just both found out that we had made the next rank for us with staff sergeant. And this shop chief looked at me and said, "You're going to be the shop chief," and he looked at this colleague of mine and he says, "You're going to be the assistant shop chief. Figure it out. If you need any help, I'll be across the street," and left us to it. And talk about throwing the baby into the deep end of the water. I think he swam better than I did, because I just about drowned. And it was about maybe I don't know how many months, maybe a year later, that they sent a technical sergeant from another shop over to straighten our shop out and to give me the training I needed in leadership to be able to run that shop. So that was an embarrassing situation, but I didn't have the leadership background. There were things that happened that I dealt with at the time that, knowing what I know now, I would have dealt with much differently. And I learned things like how to set standards and enforce them, how to establish standards and enforce them fairly across the spectrum, things like that are essential to leadership. And we'll talk about a lot of this as the course unfolds. But fast forward in the story, maybe a couple of years, we went through some time, and this man who had been our shop chief went up to the flight, made his next rank, which was senior master sergeant, and he had received an assignment within our group and he went and did that for a time, and then so we had another flight chief. Then he came back, and he called me into his office one day, and he said, "Sam, I've got to tell you something." He said, "When I came back to the flight," he said, "the first thing that I was going to do is fire you." I said, "Really?" Nobody likes to fail. He said, "But," he said, "as I've looked at your shop and your people and what you guys are doing and how things are running," he said, "you're the last of my worries." He says, "As a matter of fact, you're one of the better shops in the fleet." So we learned together, and that was a learning point for me. It felt good to be vindicated and to be receive those positive words from my boss. This was a man I respected tremendously, still do. A great leader. Learned a great deal from him. So that's it for now. And I learned from that how to lead a group of people and not alienate them. So I look forward to the discussions that will ensue over the next weeks, and I'll be very candid about my strengths and weaknesses. I'm still learning it as a leader, and there are places where I do well. Probably one of the areas where I don't do well that I need to work on is the communication. I feel I don't communicate strong enough, and I need to work on that in some of the places where I lead. So that's full disclosure, and that's where I'm at. So maybe that will encourage you to be honest with yourself and honest with us, and we can learn together. So as always, I'm reachable by email, also by cell phone or text. Let me know as you have things that develop that we can work on together. So long for now.